SPV mode idea, which is pretty clever, which says you can very, very easily check with using just like 4.4 megabytes per year, fixed amount. You can very easily check to see whether or not miners have done a lot of work on the change, and so in that way you can get some conjectural knowledge about whether or not you're looking at the right change just by kind of just cheating and only checking the easiest to check part. But of course, again, if no one is running these full nodes, then we have no way of knowing what miners are actually putting in the blocks. They could put double spins, they could just put printed money in there. So it's a complicated thing, I'm sure.
So is there any incentive beyond an ideological incentive to support the network to just to not be a miner node?
Yes, because you want it's the only way of knowing you've been paid for sure. Of course, there's no real way of knowing like completely for sure, but the same way you would never know Bank of America for sure, or that you know that this isn't all a dream or something like that. But you know, this is the rules that if the full node will download all the blocks and check all the transactions in the blocks, and then you'll know that you're looking at the same thing as everyone else, and you'll know that it obeyed all these rules of double spending, 21 million coin limit, etc.
Yeah, I'm going to take serious issue with what he said there. What he's saying is drastically different from the threat model that was, and it's always existed throughout Bitcoin. Bitcoin was designed to have a system where any user of the system could verify the correctness of it. What he's saying is, now I don't just need that software to validate it. I shouldn't use the software. I should just rely on Twitter or Telegram and go look for my nerds to tell me when it's messed up, and hope the miners don't change the incentives of the system. So the analogy I always use is if you ever go to a casino, all the money gets dumped into this one room, and there's a whole bunch of people in there counting the money. And there's cameras everywhere, there's 2 people for everything, there's all kinds of people watching the system. And you can make the argument that, well, you know, we've had this casino open for 20 years, no one's ever stole money from it. Let's just turn off the cameras, no one's gonna steal. And what he's suggesting is we just let the people in the room decide whether they're stealing money or not, and no one should watch. And maybe some guy will happen to look by and watch, and if they happen to steal the money, then he'll go sound the alarm and go tell everyone. It's drastically changing it. And the most important part of Bitcoin, in my opinion, is that there is no central authority. There's no central person telling you whether it's correct or not. We're all equals. Everyone has equal power to be able to see and validate and do that. And then, like as Paul said, this is the only way to know you've been paid. And if you're just going to rely on someone else to tell you you've been paid, why are you using Bitcoin? Just use Bank of America. I trust Bank of America more than random anonymous miners all over the world who have no identity. I have no proof of who they are. I have no recourse. At least with Bank of America, I can sue them.
Sure. I should note, I think Paul's description was extremely accurate.
I definitely be in the middle too.
But in the casino example, I maybe a better description is saying that running your own full node is like having everybody in the casino also checking that room. But it's not exactly a good example either, because the casino is the only entity that really cares about what's happening in that room. It's most definitely not like turning off the cameras or not checking, because all of the people who have an economic incentive to do the checking, exchanges, businesses, miners, and people who are otherwise interested, like you and me, they all have an incentive to keep checking. What I'm saying is that it's not exactly that black and white. There's actually kind of an equilibrium between, and this is obvious because this is how the world works right now. You can just objectively look at the network and see this is what's happening. There are some people running SPV nodes because they believe that by and large, they just want to know that they are receiving what is currently most prominent with the chain that they've chosen. And there are different forks now, in BTC and BCH and BSV and stuff. So they might choose something that was like a contentious fork. They might want to just follow the fork they've chosen. But past that, they don't need to parse through every transaction necessarily, because it's not really within their threat model. But other users, me for example, I like running a full node because I don't necessarily want to trust someone like me to kind of sound the alarm when things like that happen. But the way that the ecosystem actually works in reality is that there is an equilibrium there where it's always tugging between people who are either tugging between kind of convenience and the ability to check this stuff, and doing it yourself entirely, a lot like a division of labor thing. So it's perfectly reasonable that that there's an ecosystem of people who are telling you what is currently the state of the BTC chain or the BCH chain or the BSV chain, and you don't necessarily need to run a node for all of them if you don't want to check them all, right? But there's nothing about the system breaks if everybody in the world is not also validating at the same time.
I think,
I don't know about that.
I think
It's fine until the last sentence.
I think you don't need everyone to do it. Everyone's going to choose their own threat model in there, but the ability is, it's not, as you said, it's not a black and white thing. It's a grayscale. So, you have a certain point where it's just so simple to run. Anyone can run a node. So Bitcoin back in the early days, there was nothing happening. Pretty much you could boot it up on any computer and it didn't cost you anything. And you go to the other extreme where it's Ethereum, where no one can keep up except for like enterprise class servers, and you just use an API. So, and then you have anywhere in the middle of there. And there's going to be different points where some people are going to say this is too much, I can't run a node anymore, and it's going to depend on your economic incentives. And so the economic incentive of running, I think Theo, you're getting at this.
Yeah.
So I'll preemptively jump into that question, I guess. Well, what's the incentive to run a node is, I want to know if I got paid. So if I'm not getting paid, if I'm not accepting payments, it really doesn't matter if I run a node.
Especially it doesn't matter if you're giving away your money, you couldn't care less, so it goes through. Nobody fails to go through, so. Very well received.
Well, I think just to, rephrase basically, like, why even have, I think what most people, you're basically saying is the reason for the block size limit is so that you can run a full node.
Yes, I just want
One reason.
I just want to say that
Yes.
Right.
To make that the ecosystem of people who are validating significantly larger.
So why not just get rid of the block size limit and just go limitless?
No, because then you have, the cost of running the full node might be potentially unbounded, and that would lead to the unlimited increase in how burdensome it is to run the whole node. So then,
Right, and you get a little bit of a tragedy of the commons there, because certain miners might have weird incentives
Okay,
in order to do that. But they would have
But
a
doesn't
sense of
storage get cheaper and cheaper over time, and internet speeds get faster and faster, and so on?
one would hope that it would co-vary. The cost of running a node would kind of be something that could react to prices in hard drive space and bandwidth things, but obviously there's no it's a lot easier to just pick a number and just put it in there than it is to build some bizarre measurement system for that.
Okay. All right. So
I would agree entirely, yeah.
all right. So why do we even need to scale? What's the point of it, and why do we even need to do it at all? Jason?
No.
You want to go?
I mean,
I'll start on that
if
side.
we want crypto in general to be the new standard for money globally, then it's very important that people can make transactions.
Right.
So however that is, between chain and or on chain.
But is that stopping anyone from making a transaction if there's, let's just say there was no second layer and there's just a 500 1 megabyte or half a megabyte or whatever? Is that going to stop anyone from really transacting?
Well, I mean, specifically, it doesn't when it's being used as a cap, if it's being used as basically a spam protection mechanism to reduce the chance that the cost of running a full node will grow exponentially very quickly and happen by surprise. The most important thing there is as a network, we don't want to be surprised by how quickly the cost of running a node grows. We want to be able to make a definitive decision about that point. And that's how we tame that tragedy of the commons, by having block size limit.
Okay,
it is arbitrary where we put that, and it's a value judgment.
Okay, I have a question. Alan, if I send you a rare Pepe, is that a spam transaction?
I'm of the opinion of if it's valid transaction, it's competing against all other valid transactions, and it follows all the rules, it's not spam. I know there's different opinions.
That's also contentious, but I agree that it's what else would you?
You could say
Describing something as spam is always going to be completely arbitrary.
It's
what I'm saying there is specifically if you get a weird incentive for some miner to do one of these kind of end game attacks that you're worried about block sizes.
But if it's cheap, then people will consume more of it, and then everything that the miners will get a transaction fee every time. The the full nodes have to also pay. So it's kind of like, the full nodes are sharing in the work, but they don't get the credit, and they have to keep doing this forever, whereas the miners can kind of just forget about it. So it's not, the incentive's not quite, there's a tragedy of the commons, it's not quite.
Well, even the miners can sometimes have an incentive where adding more data is a negative cost because it harms competition more than it harms them, therefore they get a bigger share of the pie. So that gets even more perverse incentives.
Yes, but that was a concern a while ago, but I think now that everyone has SPV mines and SPY mines, it's like almost, so that particular concern doesn't really apply anymore, but that is the thing that can happen.
Kind of theoretical in 2013 and 2014.
Okay, then,
Well, I actually had, I was gonna say, does everyone agree, I was first gonna say that I run Electrum in SPV mode, so I do not run my own thing. I think it's fair to ask everyone if they run their own full node or whatever. And I just think I do think that it's in practice, it's good enough. If I were gonna receive a huge amount of money, I would switch to running it with the full node, but I don't, the money I received.
And specifically, you probably wait for more confirmations than 6.
That's true, wait for more confirmations.
Especially in this
You kinda think like-
heavy world.
Well, eventually in the wide world of Bitcoin, on the exchanges, on the block explorer, someone would notice the fork keeps hanging out on IRC. But that's a little bit like about what
Exactly.
I was saying, it's like, would be good enough or would be good enough, it depends on the type of transaction you're making. But first I wanted to just admit that I don't actually run full node, I think it's fair for you all to know. And I also wanted to say, I wonder if we can all three of us can agree that Ethereum kind of messed it up. And now it's just too difficult to run node in Ethereum, and that is just objectively bad, and it is now like crossed the threshold of just being unreasonable, where you have to go to this one company, and you don't even know like what they're doing there, and you pay them whatever it is, $5,000 a year or something.
you heard it first, Paul does not run a full node. Get on with Judge Twitter right now.
Who does that?
What a bad person.
Wrong. What an awful person.
And I have something else to say as well on related to that, which is that there is a kind of there's a kind of virtue signaling also, which is like, oh, everyone should run a full node, and we're definitely looking out for you. You know, look how great we are. We insist on absolute security to protect your money, blah blah blah. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really make that much of a difference, and it's your headache to run the full node. You know, how much is it? How many hundreds of gigabytes?
I mean, if I don't get the virtue signal, then what do I get?
It's worth going further and clarifying that if you're running a full node and you're doing it secretly, you're not helping the network, you're doing it for yourself. The thing that helps the network is if you're running a full node and if something bad happens, you alert the network.
It's much like have other people, you should only do it yourself.
But you should really, I mean, so if you were going to if you're going to virtue signal properly, you need to set up a website that tells people what the current block is or something like that, so you can actually be useful rather than just kind of running your software in secret.
Well, I mean, that's what there's this ill-conceived notion that running a node helps the network. There's some point to that, I guess, because you're helping people that aren't running full nodes, which that's debatable in itself, whether you should do that. Basically, unleash the costs off of you.
There's another thing that you cannot start up a new full node unless someone out there also has a full node. So you need at least one other full node to be out there.
But
It's like currency.
but Paul was asked, does he run a full node? And I think I may have a similar answer. I think he might have said he kind of runs a full node when he gets a free payment. So I'm in the same boat. If I get a payment from someone I trust, someone that's not as awful as Paul, I guess. He probably knows himself, I have to do it. But no, I mean, like, at Blockstream, part of our pay is in Bitcoin, and I'm willing to look at my phone's wallet, which is using some central server to tell me I got paid, because I trust that I'm gonna get paid, but when I'm getting payments from, awful people like Paul, I guess I would run a full node to make sure I'm actually getting paid before
You never know.
I deal with it. So I run a node when I need to run a node. I'm not like, I have to run it full time all the time. I run it when I'm accepting a payment from someone I don't trust. I run it periodically just to reconcile that, yes, I actually have been paid for the last 3 months. That's probably useful. But it's not something I obsess over running full time. I run the full node also just to have API access to get information that I need. That's also useful.
But at the same time, I think we all agree that if it costs too much to run a full node, then we're doomed, because then you never be able to figure out whether or not you're going to get paid or not, and then basically just stop doing anything.
I didn't answer Paul's question, is Ethereum broken? And the answer is yes. He didn't figure that out from my earlier comment.
All right, so,
Well, on your question, I guess it's maybe awkward that maybe I'm the only person on the stage who runs full node. Discuss your previous positions. But, right, and I think it's maybe a little bit proof that the purpose of a full node is not this kind of arbitrary altruistic thing where you're helping the network in some strange way. It's helpful to seed data. It's very helpful for us to be able to validate it properly. But I'm seeding, so you probably don't need to unless you don't trust me to delete stuff. It's different with Bitcoin because all you have to do is trust that somebody in the world won't delete it, because we can know whether or not it's correct if it's not deleted. So you just need somebody to be running it. And it's in a lot of ways it's a lot like sidechains. You just need someone to be validating it, and it's a very, very obvious crime if they fail.
all right, let's, now that we've talked about why we need to scale, or why we should talk about solutions that are coming out, and we'll just start with Lightning. Alan, what's Lightning?
Lightning is a second layer solution that allows people to not only just route payments between two individuals, but between any connected individuals through paths. So this lets you pay virtually anyone nearly instantly with delayed settlement. So it's a way of removing a lot of the transactions from the blockchain and leaving the blockchain more as a kind of final settlement layer.
So if I use Lightning, can I fake Lightning out and just use fake Bitcoin?
Yeah, that was weird. Someone said yesterday there's this abacus idea. This is like perfect metaphor, where it's like, and it's like, so Alan and I, or Jason and I need to like make actually it's cool because we're kind of in a line. It's like, you have one transaction to like create this abacus, which is like these little beads. Some of the beads are like, or he's got a bunch more and I got only a little.
Where are those beads at?
Yeah. The beads are,
Show me the beads.
And once we've done that on the network, then off chain we can like move the little beads back and forth, and I can say that you owes me beads for things, and you can give them to me, and then it only clicks back onto the network if there's a dispute. And the clever thing is you can then just have to go to different people and have all the little beads be locked onto some random R value, and if someone shouts the R value, then they all kind of go through like a big click thing. And so then you can pay people that you don't even know. And so it's pretty neat. It's pretty cool idea.
All right, what are some of the trade-offs for Lightning? And it's kind of nerdy right now to use. Why aren't people using large amounts in it? There's a limit to how much you can use it right now. Why is there a limit, and why are people using it for small amounts, not big amounts? And can I just close a channel and somehow defraud you? What are the risks?
Yeah, so the limits that are in place. So when I remember Rusty mentioned this to me when he said it, he didn't want anyone, it's new software, he didn't want anyone to lose more than a beer. The price of Bitcoin has changed a little bit in the last 2 years, so it's now quite expensive. Maybe a nice, drink of scotch instead of a super fancy scotch instead of a beer, but it's still early. There's still a possibility for loss, and there's a slightly different model of backup. So you mentioned, what could go wrong? Could you, lose your money? And this relies on reactive security. So if a bad transaction or a previous state was broadcast, unless I'm reacting to that, it's possible that someone could defraud me out of the money. And there's some advancements coming, we'll talk about this probably more in the Lightning panel, but that will allow a much easier way to recover funds and react more efficiently with a proposal called L2 that will allow third parties to watch for you in a much easier way, and you don't have to worry about if I accidentally broadcast the wrong state that someone's going to steal my funds. So there's still room for advancement in Lightning, but it's coming along nicely.
Jake, do you have anything to say about that?
Yeah, so in general, I think Lightning is a very cool system. I just gave a talk an hour ago about a language and a compiler and an IDE that I've been working on as an open source project, probably released fairly soon after this video gets up. But it's a way to work with Bitcoin script in an editor and see the line-by-line evaluation of what's going on with the stack. So there's some very cool stuff in Lightning and some very clever constructions with Bitcoin script. So I think that's pretty cool. And I think Lightning is also very exciting as a way of compressing certain types of transactions, where your threat model is maybe different than the things you want to use on-chain for, and making those transactions significantly lighter weight for, you know, they're saving significant cost to the network in order to do that. I would say it does not necessarily follow that just because I think Lightning is cool, that the entire world should be, you know, using Lightning for everything. I would be concerned about some censorship resistance properties that are maybe slightly inferior on Lightning that are doing pretty well on chain.
Okay, so if I open a channel with you, who owns the Bitcoin in the channel?
It's quite cool with the Bitcoin scripting language is actually a language designed to create authentication requirements. So it's one of the things I think is most cool about Bitcoin as a system. It has a very, very clever way of doing authentication. Rather than some massive spec, if you look at all sorts of different authentication plans, they've got, you know, 80-page specs for you know, OAuth 2.0 and a few others. Look at some of the newer authentication stuff, it's even more. They have these massive static specs for how authentication is supposed to work, and you fit your use cases into those specs. And Bitcoin is pretty cool because the spec is just a virtual machine for a you know, hypothetical stack-based language, which makes it really easy to use some basic primitives to describe how you want to authenticate to get your Bitcoin. So you can have a single signature, or you can have a multi-signature thing, or you can have a multi-signature with an if statement with a fallback that falls back to something else, and after 72 hours you can sweep it and don't get out of the channel. So it gets really, you can do some really creative stuff, and you can design your own schemes that are very complicated. And Lightning is one scheme that's actually not very complicated. But it uses that programming language quite cleverly to avoid some serious counterparty risk in ways that are impossible to do on something that's not like Bitcoin. So in a very general sense, for example, if the world's banking systems were running on Lightning in 2008, we would have been in a much better position as a society. So there's some really cool things that you can get out of this.
Why would we be in a better position if the banking system used Lightning in 2008?
I think that the mainstream people like to call it contagion now, but you know, having reserves here that are expected to be going to another bank, that are expected to be going to another bank, the Lightning on some levels enforces some scarcity of the assets on the chain. There is a discussion of whether or not you're validating what the state of the Lightning network looks like, and so we're back to that discussion again of whether or not you want to be running a full node, whether or not you want to be running a Lightning watchtower or whatever. So now I'm not even too familiar with what it looks like these days. Yeah, so it's interesting there. But I would hesitate to say that Lightning is the be-all, end-all solution to get everything off-chain so that we just use Bitcoin for settlement. I think that would have some very scary, potentially scary results for censorship resistance, which is the reason I'm into Bitcoin.
Why not just use an altcoin instead of Lightning? If you want to do, you know, just use another chain that's cheaper. Paul, what do you think?
Well, the existence of altcoins, I think, as Gavin and Jason put it, is a kind of way of cheating around the 21 million Bitcoin limit, because there's this fixed amount of stuff in the world, and then there's a fixed amount of purchasing power, like money, your ability to buy that stuff, and then it's all just divided among all the world's monies, like US dollar, yen, whatever, Bitcoin Cash, etc., Ethereum. And so they all kind of compete with each other for claims on all the stuff in the world. And when you have these altcoins, it's basically an inflation tax on Bitcoiners. And there's no, I'll say there's no reason to use an altcoin when you could just simulate that with a sidechain and my own project, but that's, it's also like cutting edge, so be very potential.
Is there ICO?
Nope, there's no ICO, none of that.
Throw off the stage.
Yeah. So why shouldn't I just use an altcoin instead of Lightning? I get the features of being if it's a proof of work chain. I have the censorship resistant feature, and it's might be cheaper fees, might be faster.
Yeah, so, I mean, an altcoin by its nature is going to be less secure than Bitcoin. As Paul mentioned, it's the inflation tax. Bitcoin's a lot more than just a payment network. It's not just a way to pay people. It is also sound money. It is the soundest money ever created. And every time you take an attack on that by saying there's another coin and it's just as good, you're basically diluting the supply and you're limiting the potential of Bitcoin. And, you know, we have in the world currencies everywhere. We have yen, we have dollars, we have rubles, we have, you know, everything out there. But in the end, it would be better if everyone had their own money. I've been to 3 countries in the last 2 weeks, and I have change in my pocket from all these countries, and it's kind of useless to me. And that's a friction. And if there was one currency that could do that, Bitcoin ideally should be the one that does that. And you know, when you're transacting with these altcoins, you're changing to a different security model. They can be 51% taxed very easily. There was an attack on, was it Ethereum Classic pretty recently?
Ethereum Classic, yeah.
And every time you have these minor chains, you're basically splitting the proof of work, making everything else less secure, less stable, and harming cryptocurrencies in general. So everything should be on Bitcoin if we can do it.
Doesn't Blockstream have Litecoin and stuff and Grin and stuff like that? Are they harming Bitcoin?
We don't have any of this, so I'm not sure where that's going from. The worst we do is we give you data about it, but no, Blockstream is. I think we might have some Bitcoin Cash on our physical Bitcoin. We haven't peeled the stickers off, but that's maybe they did. But yeah, no, we've dumped everything that's dumpable. But if we are a Bitcoin centric company,
So it's just a data service for Litecoin and someone working on Grin that works for Blockstream.
no one at Blockstream works on Grid.
Okay, you heard it here first. Crypto's better.
I would agree with high level. I would agree with most of the points that both of them made, and I'll add only a few other things. First, currency competition is universally good, and no matter what kind of competition we have in the crypto space, you have to recognize there's always competition with Bitcoin from the outside. There are always alternatives to Bitcoin outside of crypto. So hating anything that's a copy of Bitcoin just because it's digital is almost as unreasonable as hating silver because it competes with Bitcoin, right? But I would say that the other thing is, I think you're definitely right about friction with currencies. I think that the ultimate state of currencies appears to be that we'll probably have a long tail distribution of one currency which is kind of, rules them all, and then others which are either, in various stages of trying to compete with that currency. And most notably, I would add, there is one very useful effect of alternative currencies other than Bitcoin, and one reason they should stick around, including forks of Bitcoin like BTC and BSV in this case. They serve in the same way that when a big company puts up a server and they're running one of their applications on that server in order to serve the public. If that server goes down and the world ends because our money stops working, it's a big problem. So I think it's very, very unlikely that the entire world is going to be okay with us having one universal currency and no other alternatives waiting in the wings.
Okay,
So for that alone, I think that altcoins are useful.
Okay, we're getting low on time, but I just want to hit one of the topics really big, Paul's favorite side chains, maybe, right? So, so Paul, just tell us really quickly what a side chain is, and also tell us why should I use a side chain instead of an altcoin?
Yeah, so a sidechain is basically an altcoin, but you use the BTC unit instead of having its own money. So it doesn't create its own. Litecoin creates its own Litecoin supply, and then you can pay Litecoin transaction fees, and you have to go to Shapeshift or Coinbase or whatever and buy them back and forth. But the way sidechains work is they start with no coins on them at all, zero, and then you deposit coins into them from the main chain. You start on Bitcoin Core, and you click some buttons, and your money disappears from over there, and it reappears on the second piece of software, the sidechain. And then you can do, it's a different piece of software, so just like an altcoin, you can do whatever you want with it over there. You can have really bad design choices, you can invite all these crazy people to do this weird stuff, and then theoretically you should be able to take the new owners who have the money on the sidechain, they should be able to reassign it back, and it should show up back on Bitcoin Core where it's supposed to go. And why should you use one? I think really a lot of people ask questions like that, or that are similar to that, or that question in particular. And I really think it's more like you inevitably would not have a choice, because the smallest of the altcoins, you know, you'd be copying all these altcoin features, and then there'd just be this crisis of confidence in each altcoin. One at a time, the smallest one would just kind of be eliminated, and there'd be a new smallest one, and people would think, why am I going along with this tiny altcoin when you could do the exact same thing, all the same exact features in Bitcoin Core? So this is a very strong competitor. You have just easier to have one money instead of different monies, no exchange rate risk, that type of thing.
Okay. What do we have, 5 minutes? Yeah. Okay. All right, let's just take some questions, because I'm sure people have questions. Sir, in the front.
So yeah, but for all three,
So I know we talked a lot about the impact of block size on as far as the ability to run a full node, and that seemed to be the major point of differentiation. But another, in my mind, another huge one is the structure of a fee market. So I'd like each of you to comment on what you think the future of a fee market looks like with a restricted or open block size. And is it necessary to have an internal blocks full fee market established before the reward subsidy, or how's that going to work?
Which one of you wants to take it? No, sir.
Yeah, so definitely there needs to be a fee market for Bitcoin to succeed eventually, whether that's done through a block size limit or not. I actually take a different position than a lot of maximalists. If there needs to be a fee market for security, miners have the power to implement a block size limit to force fee markets. So I've been less concerned about the fee market, because the miners, they can solve the problem themselves. By doing that, if they don't, for whatever reason, if the incentives for the miners don't, then yes, a user defined fee market would be needed, and that could be done as well. So worst case scenario, you do that. But again, the block size limit is a hard fork, and that's, whether we want to change it, or whether it's optimal or not, that's a different issue, because you're basically forcing a split of the currency. So it's almost like a non-starter for most cases.
I don't have much to add to that specifically, and I also don't have many original ideas on the subject, but if you're curious, you should watch part 4 of Paul's video on sidechains.
What I talk about what he was saying, with the miners can paradoxically make more money, and both can have the ability and the incentive to. But I have some recent thoughts about that, which are that the mere existence of altcoins probably makes it so that people are unwilling to pay. So even though miners can fee maximize, they may literally not be able to get that maximized number very high. And then we see this in Bitcoin Core today, where the fees are very low, despite the currency kind of being more famous than ever. And I wonder what will happen the next hype cycle, if people will decide that they're willing to pay $50 fees, or that will only ever be like a kind of temporary thing, like during bubbles, and then when the dust settles, people will figure out that they can batch the transactions, or use altcoins, or just use some kind of Coinbase Pay thing or something like that, and then they will not want to be paying these fees on chain. And so as a result, I think that there is a danger that even though the fee market could be maximized, it would only be maximized at basically an amount of money that is not much higher than it is today, ever, and that would not be good as the block size. The subsidy, the 12.5 keeps getting halved. That would be great. But it would be great if we had sidechains and reverse mine, you could collect all of them.
So I have a question. You have one? Here we go.
I think I kind of got Paul's answer to this already.
Okay.
Do you think it would be okay if it was more expensive to open up a payment channel than it is to run a full node? Because I think that the way you are talking, that could be something that you foresee happening.
I love that as an example, because there are a lot of economic questions that you can have kind of a funny opinion about it until you try to take it to its logical extreme, and that does indicate to us that what we're talking about is a value judgment between two options. And in my opinion, the channel should be significantly cheaper to open than running a full node, because there's always an incentive for people to verify that the chain is honest. And because I want to know if I've been paid, it's either, for me personally, I can decide if I want to know definitively enough to run my own full node, or if I just want to, for example, pay someone else to run it for me and trust that the wallet that I use from Edge or BitPay or Copay or Coinbase or whatever, trust that that wallet is correct and is telling me honest things about BTC, the state, the current head, the state of the BTC or BSV or BCH chain. So it's simply a value judgment for the participants. The incentives don't actually change here. We're just talking about a scale.
When you have a payment channel is a one-time event, running a node is an ongoing cost too. So it's kind of like, should my rent be more than my food, or I guess a dinner out? That's one-time expense versus ongoing, so it's hard to compare them. And again, it's value judgment. The payment channel itself becomes not very valuable when you can never validate that it's actually valid. So if you've destroyed the whole incentive to use it, what good is it? So it may not be a choice we can make, and it's not something we should centrally planned or decided. It's going to evolve organically.
Question?
Right. I want you to expand. You talked about censorship in line. I want you to expand a little bit on that. You can understand how the measuring of the censorship. Yeah. You mentioned it during your talk.
So censorship resistance is a vague term for a lot of things. So fundamentally, you have to think about the thing, specifically the threat model you're considering. And there are certain properties of Lightning that are advantageous compared to on-chain transactions, and there are certain other properties that are not. Among them, at least in the American system of government, Lightning nodes are perhaps slightly more targetable than end users are. And so even if you like your politicians now, it's conceivable that in 10 or 15 years or whatever, there will be politicians you don't like, and they will make it illegal to do whatever. It might be completely arbitrary. And there are certain properties about Lightning that are slightly different. One thing that I really like about Bitcoin is the system is very, very fundamentally censorship resistant. Mining can be done practically anonymously. You can throw a block up from anywhere in the world one time from one connection, and then you can disappear. And the world doesn't care who you are or how you did that. All they care about is that the hash has enough zeros at the beginning, right? And so you're in the nonsense, correct. That is a very, very cool property. Mind you, right now the mining ecosystem is very highly connected, but only because they're not threatened. The current model for Bitcoin also works in a very threatened model, and it's one of the reasons that I think it actually prevents Bitcoin from being attacked in that way, because that attack degrades to something where the miners win anyways. But the same is not true necessarily for something that are long, ongoing connections where you need to maintain a stable identity and a stable network connection, and there are capital requirements for what you keep in the channel. So it has very different censorship-resistant properties. There are some things that are nice about it, and then you get some privacy at the end user. There are some privacy things you can get out of it that are currently not very possible on chain. You might actually be censored from certain Bitcoin services because you try to use coin transactions. But in Lightning, that's hidden from the network. However, there are other properties about it that are not so censorship resistant, and they are kind of existential.